What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one, breaks down what's going on with the overall market, what you should be watching for moving forward. I'm also going to talk about what's happening with all this big data that's coming out, what's going on with the earnings, and what the news is saying about the markets. But before I do anything like this and dissect what these charts are basically doing for now, let me just mention a couple of things before starting. I am personally not a financial planner, so make sure you take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends in just 6 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. So SPY is currently up 0.29%. It actually reached my target from yesterday around this 450 area to fill this gap, and we actually went all the way up there already in the pre-market. So we did get this green, a very, very nice green move so far throughout the market. You can see Tesla's up 0.5%, Apple's up 0.5% as well. The triple Q is up almost 0.3%. The Nasdaq as well. The market is up so far in the pre-market, getting a nice bounce. And the question is, can we continue to pump? Well, that depends on if we can break this resistance right over here. So I'm going to break this down in just a couple of minutes. Let's first talk about something else that's very interesting. So looking at our data that's dropping, we don't really have anything too big coming out for today, but I just want to remind you all, CPI comes out for tomorrow, and the market can be very, very tricky on days like this. If the market pumps very hard, I'm going to be wondering, are we going to see a rug pull tomorrow? If the market drops today, are we going to see a pump tomorrow, depending on CPI? We should be very, very careful. Sometimes it doesn't even do anything like that. Sometimes it just keeps going and going and going in one direction. So CPI could be very, very tricky. It comes out tomorrow before the market opens. Make sure you're ready for that. Today's going to be the last day. So expect some hedging, expect some interesting price action because of it. Now, for earnings, just as a reminder, we just had Sony's earnings, but we're waiting for Disney to come out after the market closes. And then we have Alibaba coming out later on. Now, 5 things to know about the market before it opens, according to CNBC. I'm going to just quickly go over these. There's still talk about the downgrade from many of these, or for many of these big banks. It actually was for about 11 of them. And this caused a downside for the markets, but the market's trying to recover from it so far. And to add on to this, there was some news that came out about the Federal Reserve being done with the rate hikes, according to Harker. There's a possibility of that, but this will depend on the CPI report that's about to come out. And then when it comes to credit card debt, there's still, once again, some news that came out that the credit card balances have topped $1 trillion for the first time ever. Accounting for inflation, that is no surprise. And the level of debt here in America is just unbelievable. And on top of this, we have WeWorks. There's another warning from them. They basically came out of some possible bankruptcy after getting a previous valuation of about $40 billion for going public. This was some negative news, and then there's also some other things going on politically, but I'm going to not talk as much about that. So for now, this is what the market's looking at. The market's trying to cool off a bit. We also have some big moves from many of these different companies, such as WeWork, which dropped 25%. Carvana added 7.4% to it. Lyft is down about 6% so far. And overall, some big moves are actually listed right about here. All right. And then on top of this, we had Sony's earnings. Just real quick, let's just go over this. Sony, of all things, I don't know what just happened here. Sony basically has raised their forecast on PlayStation, which is good news for them, but their profit dropped about 31% in the first quarter, despite the fact that they had some strong guidance. So let's hope that they really maintain that guidance to hold up the way they are. Sony's a very popular company, and despite the fall in profits, hopefully we see an improvement in their overall revenue and their operating profit. But anyways, now let's talk about the market. How are things looking so far? So looking at SPY, it's very simple right now. We are basically, approaching this resistance right now on the 30 minutes 200 EMA. Now, if we reject off this, we could see this thing come down to fill this gap. There's a possibility of a drop to about this is around 448.74, a small little drop before this thing tries to bounce. But if we break above the 200, I'm expecting this thing to fly all the way up to much higher levels. We're going to be watching this thing hit 451, then potentially 452.9 becomes one possibility if we break above the 200. So that's the resistance to watch for. My gut tells me that what's going to happen is we might see a little downside. It might come down to fill this gap and try to bounce, or come halfway then try to bounce. We tend to see the market pop in the open and slow down. So I'm going to be watching this for some time because there is still some time for the pre-market to continue. So we might cool off a little bit more before this thing tries to get a pop in the open. And I think we're going to test this 200 during the open hours, and we'll see if the market could try to break this. or not. It already reached my target of 450. I was talking about 450 yesterday, and we technically got a nice bounce today so far. So that's a good thing to witness in the pre-market. I believe it's going to make an attempt to fight the 200. If it manages to break it, which I think it most definitely can, it's a possibility. We could see this thing pop very nicely just to start us off. But just as a reminder, before CPI comes out during like the ending of the day, during the last few hours, we tend to see some like sideways price action. So there could be a slowdown after a big move during the first couple of hours. So we're going to be watching some high volatility for the first few hours, then very sideways price action for the last like 3-4 hours. Unfortunately, that's what tends to happen. We tend to see some hedging in the market just getting ready for CPI. I think that's what's going to happen near the end of the day. So sideways price action, very boring stuff. But in the morning, we're going to see high volatility. We might even see this thing attempt to break out if we could break and hold above the 200 EMA. So that's what I'm looking for. We may start off a little weak, come down to like fill this gap or come very close to it, drop a little bit, and then try to get a bounce by the time we open. We're going to try to break the 200. We might break it, we might not. It really depends. It already reached our target of 450, so that's a good sign for people who are holding calls. Then expect some sideways price action as the day goes on. As for Tesla, I think there's a good chance that Tesla actually has this gap down here. So could Tesla come down to fill this gap first during like the very beginning? There's a possibility of a small little drop. It's not that bad. It's just like less than $1. Then we might see a pop near open, and we're going to be watching Tesla test 252 again. And I think if Tesla could break 252, we're going to be watching for a test of 255. We come very close to this imbalance right here. I think there's a good chance this is going to make an attempt to do so. It may start off with a little drop, like between now and the time the market opens, because I'm recording this like almost an hour before open. It may cool off a little bit more and then get a nice pop in the open. Maybe it gets very close to like 255 or so, then rejects off that and just trades sideways for the majority of the day. But it should close green, in my opinion. I'm predicting a green close for Tesla. That's what I'm basically projecting for Tesla. For Apple is pumping nicely in the pre-market, but once again, we have this gap below. May cool off a little bit to fill this gap and then try to get a bounce after that. We're going to be watching this thing base around 180, then try to continue pushing. If it breaks above 180, watch 181.5, then potentially this imbalance up here around 182 becomes another possibility. So I believe Apple's going to drop a little bit, then get a bounce, try to push up to 181.5 to 182, somewhere between there, then come right back down and then trade sideways for the majority of the day with some boring price action as we approach CPI. For the triple Q, I think this thing may come down a little bit more, retest just under 372 or just around 372, then try to bounce off that and get a retest of 373.8. And we'll see if it can break that. If that breaks, then we're going to be watching this other gap that's unfilled. There's another gap all the way up here. Not sure if we're going to get there. If we do get there, that's going to lead to another nice bounce, and there's a real possibility of that happening. And then if that's the case, the market could still just start shopping after getting a nice bounce, just start shopping for the end of the day. And then we're going to see how it reacts to all of that. As far as the video goes, looking a little weak right now, unfortunately, retesting 444. So we're going to be watching if this holds or not. If 444 breaks, then 440, is the next support. Then we have 436 and 433. For resistance, watch 446, 447.25 as two little resistance zones on our EMAs. And above that, we have like 450, 452.5. And we also have like 455 above that. So how is the video looking right now? It's kind of like sideways, not really doing that well. One thing that concerned me about the video from yesterday was we had this pattern that tends to be a little bit more bearish historically, but there's no guarantee it's going to play out, right? Because at the time I was talking about the video, it was looking quite decent. So I think it's going to be dragged by the market and might make it a very sideways day. Going to be looking for this thing to come down a little bit more. It could retest like 442 or so, then try to bounce, see a potential bounce and a retest of 447. If not 450, come right back down and just trade sideways for the rest of the day. It looks like we may get a sideways day because of, once again, we're approaching CPI and it's just getting ready for a very, very nice move. And for now, this trend has been very sideways, right? It hasn't really moved that much. It is looking a little bit more bearish in terms of the pattern, but for now, there's a little weakness to it. So I'm going to be anticipating like another pops and a drop and just more sideways price action for the time being. And then CPI will determine if we get a much bigger drop or a much bigger pump to the upside. That is still very possible for Nvda, and it will be impacted by CPI just like AMD and all these other stocks. Looking at the VIX, this thing's up about 1.4%. But don't forget that as we're dropping, we haven't fully filled this gap down here. So we might see the VIX come a little bit lower. We have another gap below. We also have our 200 EMA as support. So we will see if it ends up coming down to the 200. If that happens, that would be a bullish signal for the markets. The market could help this thing, uh, cause this thing to come down even more. But we'll have to wait and see on that. If it ends up breaking support, it's currently trying to test support around 15.9. So we'll just wait and see on that. The dollar is down a little bit, which could be a decent sign for the markets, getting this big rejection candle right here. Uh, if the dollar starts to continue to downtrend, if it breaks below our 50 EMA at this 102.44 area, expect more downside and this thing to retest 102.32. If that starts dropping, it's going to be bullish for the markets. Coinbase, we were talking about this thing reaching 90. It's currently at 88.7, getting very close to our target. Looks quite nice, pretty decent looking setup, a nice bounce off previous resistance, which became support. So we're going to be watching this thing approach 89 or so. And finally, for the 10-year treasury yield, this thing is starting to drop. It's actually popping just a little bit. This could be a kind of like bearish signal. We might see the market drop a little bit because of this, then reject. And if this rejects, then we might see the market bounce, but could see a slight cool off because of that. And then Amazon, not really doing anything. It's very flat in the pre-market. I do expect lots of sideways price action between 138 and about 142. And then for Meta is looking a little bit more bullish than Amazon because first off, you have this inverse head and shoulders like structure. It could be looking for a pop to 316 to 318. But it's going to start off a little weak with a little drop, probably to about 312 before getting a bounce. So that's what I'm seeing for the market. See, the market's already starting to downtrend just a little bit more. I was calling out for a little bit of downside for now. We might see a little downside here. It might come down to, fill this gap or get very close to doing so. You might see SPY drop like a little bit less than a dollar, like 80 cents or so. And then we might get a nice bounce somewhere off this EMA or something very close to where this support is. And we're going to get a retest of this 200 most likely for this like 450 retest. And I'm not sure if we're going to break this or not. That's the only thing. We could break the 200 temporarily, get a nice push up, then come right back down and trade sideways. Or we might not do so and just chop for the rest of the day. So I'm going to be looking for a drop and a pop, some high volatility. And I still think SPY, the market should get a green day today. And then we will see if we can break resistance or not. But for now, please remain calm, cool, and collected. Do what you have to do. Watch support and resistance levels. And remember, it is going to be the day before CPI. So remember to adjust accordingly. And don't forget that the market may see some high volatility for the first few hours. But during the last 3 or 4 hours, we tend to see the market slow down. And we might see some sideways price action. And things may get very boring approaching CPI because of that. And that's what tends to happen as we get hedging and the market's just very patient. With that said, have a great day, everyone. Watch your levels carefully, do what you have to do, and please manage risks, not financial advice. Market to the moon, as the long term is very bright, and peace out.